Welcome to Cover Your Eyes. Today we're talking about the movie Lethal Weapon from 1987. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Holly.
So, this
So,
movie,
yes. I kept thinking that I can't believe this is the movie that we're going to watch. I don't know why. For some reason, I just felt weird about it because I feel like it's not a movie that we would typically choose. We don't pick like a lot of action movies,
no. Well,
even though we just did Top Gun, but that's like not really an action movie.
I guess it is an action. I guess it is
I guess so.
considered an action movie.
Yeah.
So one of our lovely, amazing patrons,
Mhm.
John, is actually the one that recommended this movie. Hey, we're doing a Hollywood Hunk series. Any recommendations? And it's like, who did your mom think was hot
Mhm.
in the 80s, basically? And John said that they rented Lethal Weapon. He said, my mom rolled her eyes since she wasn't a fan of action movies. And the first few minutes have a naked woman in it. But once Mel shows up and shows his butt, my mom changed her tune and watched the entire movie with us. Definitely an awkward moment.
Your mom likes Mel Gibson.
Oh, he also mentioned, though, that she doesn't like him anymore.
Oh, yeah. Yes, John, thanks for that recommendation. And everyone has to say that they don't like him anymore.
Well,
Yeah. So we have to say like the obligatory disclaimer at the beginning, I guess. I know that
Sure.
it's annoying, but okay. Obviously, Mel Gibson turned out to be like an anti-Semite and maybe in general just racist. I think. I don't remember.
I don't know the details. To me, my impression was that he has some severe alcohol issues. He was raised basically like a fundamentalist Catholic, if you could call it that. And I think he is extremely anti-Semitic.
Yes.
I am not going to say he's like evil or anything. I feel like if you're racist, don't get drunk.
And
go to therapy. That's my tips. If you're racist, and stay off Twitter.
Definitely that. Yes. So now that that's out of the way, it's 1987 and Mel Gibson hasn't done any of that shit yet that we know of. And he's just some hot dude with a crazy mullet. So we're in our time machine and that's what's happening.
Exactly.
We'll take it from there.
Yes. So when I read John's email, I thought I definitely related because this was actually one of the movies where my mom was like super into it. She was also into Danny Glover though, so she liked both of them.
I remember you said that. Good for her. It's a double feature for her.
Yeah. She even told me, Danny Glover is very flexible.
What? Why does she know that?
Because I guess he was on one of the late night talk shows and he did some kind of like yoga or something. And she was telling me about how he was like demonstrating how flexible he was. But I was like, oh my God, my mom thinks this guy's really hot. Like, she was like telling me excitedly. And I thought, like, wow, I'm like kind of uncomfortable right now.
Yeah, that is kind of uncomfortable, but that's good for her. So I was thinking that while I was watching it today, it was like they put Mel Gibson in there, like shirtless a lot and nude at the beginning to like get the ladies in. And that's what happened. It worked. Because women don't want to go see an action movie typically. And having him in there was just like eye candy for the ladies while the guys could watch things blowing up. So it was actually genius. And both of your moms are proof.
Old Dick Donner. Our old friend Dick Donner.
Okay. Now, I meant to look this up, but is he the Flashdance dude?
The Omen.
What's the Omen? Okay, okay. I knew it was one of them. What did you think of it?
Okay, well, I guess I can go ahead and give the summary
Oh yeah. Okay,
first.
thanks.
So to summarize, I would say that this movie is about two Vietnam vet detectives. Riggs is a a drug detective, and Roger is a homicide detective. So I guess the police were like, hey, we've got this guy who's totally out of control in the narco department. So why don't we send him over to homicide, because they're already dealing in dead bodies? And a lot more are going to show up when this guy gets on the scene. Roger's like, I'm too old for this shit. They don't like each other at first. Then they like each other kind of once they find out they were both in Vietnam. They have like immediate, instant bonding there. Roger lists like all of the different ways in which Riggs knows how to kill people and calls him a lethal weapon. And then the main story is that there's a dead girl. That's the murder that they're investigating. Turns out it's a bunch of ex-Vietnam guys who went into Laos and completely took over the village where the main heroin trade was happening. And they took over the whole thing, basically colonizing this little tiny portion of Laos so that they could sell heroin to people in the United States. And the murdered girl was the daughter of one of Roger's Vietnam buddies. And she was murdered to get back at her dad. They catch the guys, and everybody eats a terrible dinner that Roger's wife cooked. And that's the story of Lethal
The
Weapon.
end.
Bye.
Bye. Hope you liked it. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I am amazed because last week not last week. Last week was our Patreon bonus, but which, by the way, you know what? If you guys want to go to Patreon, and there's a link in our notes for some delightful treats. We got some Sweet Valley High going on over there. We're chatting it up, telling some murder stories.
We've got everything. We've got werewolves, we've got Geraldo and Satanists. We've got a little bit of everything.
It's a Mod Podge. And you can always just subscribe for a month and listen to everything. And then unsubscribe too.
Okay.
Just saying.
All right, sure.
We don't have commercials, and I would really like to keep it that way. It's nice. I like not having commercials. And I also like being rewarded for what we do. So join us on Patreon.
That's cool. We don't usually talk about our Patreon.
No, we don't. I just thought, do I have issues with receiving love and affection and money? Yes. And so I thought I would just boldly talk about how wonderful our Patreon is. Mm-hmm. We also really enjoy chatting with our Patreon members.
Oh, yeah.
I found that to be one of the most rewarding things about the podcast that I didn't really anticipate. Because when we started, I just sort of felt like we were having a good time. It was a really fun, interesting way to hang out with each other.
Now we're not enjoying it anymore.
And we just need money. Now we're only in it for the money, okay?
You're hilarious.
It's like the fucking mothers of invention over here.
Oh my God. Okay, the movie. You've peddled your wares long enough, Missy.
That's right. She's cutting me off. I'm too old for this shit.
Yeah, so the movie starts, well, it starts with Mel Gibson. Or does it start with Danny? In the beginning, it's Danny Glover's 50th birthday, and he's taking a nice hot bath in the morning, and then suddenly his like entire family bursts into the bathroom with a birthday cake to sing him happy birthday. And it's like, that's sweet, but in the bathroom? And would I ever even think of going near the bathroom while my dad was in there? And especially not in the bathtub. And especially like it didn't look like one of those 80s movies bubble baths with like 6 inches of bubbles to hide your body parts. It just looked like bath time. And I was like, this is kind of weird. They're
agree.
A lovely family. I love that they're close and how they relate. But that was like,
it's one thing like if you're like a 7-year-old, but when you're a teenager, Roger's daughter, who's a teenager, gives him a hug while he's in the bathtub. And I was like, this isn't really how my family operated. Like, although I do want to put a call out to the listeners that, to all you guys, that if you were like cool with that, or if your family was open in that way and there wasn't anything weird about it, I would really like to know, because I know everybody grows up differently.
Yeah, I mean, there may be some like super healthy family where they don't think that's weird in any way.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd love to know the like dynamics of your family, if that's the case.
Yeah, that was the most striking scene for me in the beginning.
Lethal Weapon starts off with Woody from Cheers' girlfriend, the actress Jackie Swanson.
Oh, that's who that was.
You know how I feel about Christmas music? Immediately, I'm irritated because it's Jingle Bell Rock, and it's like one of those like, hey, it's the 80s and we're rocking out on all these Christmas songs. There's some coke snorting, and then we got some dead lady boobs.
Yeah, first live lady boobs and then dead lady boobs.
And I thought, hated it. Gotta say.
Oh yeah, that was a bad start for you, huh?
That was a real bad start.
Yeah.
First you get me with the fucking Christmas music, and then it's dead lady boob time. I know that every time I kill myself, I do it in lingerie. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, you don't know when the mood strikes what you'll be wearing.
Well, it wouldn't have mattered because she was going to die anyway, we find out. Because she had some poison that was put into some pills that she took. So
I think they said drain cleaner. So that's like an homage to Heather's.
Did Heather's get that from?
I don't know. Oh, was Heather's after this? Anyways.
Anyway, it's connected. It's all connected.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's so 80s. There's like white lace and coke everywhere.
We find out that that Kelly is into sex work.
And pornography.
But they don't call it that, of course, because it's 1987. They make jokes like, and this is good guy family man Roger. He says to a sex worker, all dressed up and no one to blow.
And then she's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Dixie.
It's like, hey, Roger, why don't you arrest some of the fucking guys that are paying for it? Oh, right, Eve. So, yeah, this movie is not striking me as anything that feels safe to watch thus far. Because we're like, bam, 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 hooker, hooker, hooker. That's what you hear over and over in this movie. I like the word whore, personally. I like the word slut. Like, if somebody calls me a whore or a slut, I'm like, well, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I do enjoy sex. And yes, I do have sovereignty over my body and I can do with it whatever I want. But whenever it's men calling women who they have in handcuffs hookers and prostitutes, it sounds really hateful.
in this movie, the way that they say the word hooker. And I was like, a word is a word. It's the meaning that people put behind the word that makes it feel gross whenever you hear it. There's been a shift to another word, to sex worker, and that's a word that the women doing the work have decided to call themselves. If we say hooker or prostitute while we're talking about this movie, it's because of the way that it's being framed. So I also want to say that because it's a thing.
Yeah, they said it so many times.
I mean, they used to have God, what did they call that with the cops? It was like they're like not human or something whenever they would get a homicide.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I wish I could remember what it's called. But
yeah,
it's like part of the reason that it's really, as far as I understand, the reason it's really important to not call people hookers or prostitutes is because those words are associated with a legal system that says those people with that label aren't human and they're not worth investigating. And all you have to do is look at the most boring serial killer in the world, Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer, to see that that's true.
I think we need to talk about Mel Gibson's butt for a minute to change
the
subject.
I just thought we needed like an exorcism from all of this like blatant misogynistic bullshit that happens at the very beginning of this movie.
A lot of it's pretty jam-packed in the beginning, and then I think it eases.
They try to hit us hard at the beginning.
Yeah.
Almost as if we're being ambushed.
We were, and it worked.
So then we see Mel Gibson's butt. Our introduction to Mel Gibson is like, he looks super punk rock. He gets up in the morning, he gets himself a beer, and he's like nude, and he's smoking, and he's drinking. And you know that this guy's got some history. And he does not give a fuck. Because the first thing he did when he woke up after he lit his cigarette was went to the refrigerator and got himself a beer. Is his future uncertain? Is the end always near?
Always near. Jim works in the doors. Okay. Yes. So, and he like lives in a camper on the beach, and he's got a dog, and he's just like super juxtaposed with Danny Glover's super organized, family oriented, perfect looking life. Little do they know they're about to have their worlds collide. I meant to do a suicide trigger warning because it starts off with a suicide.
Yes.
And then I really enjoyed this movie way more than I thought. I was not really expecting to enjoy it at all. I didn't think I'd hate it, but I was just like, meh. But then I was actually kind of into it. We see like Mel Gibson, he's got, like you said, his life appears to be kind of in shambles. Like he just doesn't care. But then later we find out that it's because he is a widower and his wife was killed in a tragic car accident. And so he's just depressed. That's why he doesn't care. And he drinks all the time. And he doesn't care about his own life in danger and do wild things on the job. Because really, he just has like a death wish.
Yes.
And he's not always actively pursuing, but he's like, if I die, fine. Maybe I'd be better off dead.
And people say things about him like, where the hell did you get him? Psychos or us?
I don't remember hearing that one. Yeah, people say things like that. He's kind of got a rep around the office. You see him do all this wild stuff and do a drug bust, and he almost gets killed then. And then he's like really shaken up about that. And then that night he goes home and he's got the picture of his dead wife, their wedding picture. And then you realize like, oh, this is why he's so sad.
So, okay, we're going to talk about suicide for a minute here. This was super triggering for me because
oh my God,
my cousin killed himself by gunshot. And then I've had a gun held to my head. So whenever I see like a gun to the head, I'm always like, oh, fuck. And like, let's get out of here. And you know what, though? Like, I sit with it because like what I do whenever I get triggered, and it's like a physiological response where I start to feel like my sympathetic nervous system's kicking up. And, you know, I take deep breaths. So like I paused the movie and I took some deep breaths and I was like, this is a movie. I'm here right now in my living room working on one of the funnest projects I've ever worked on in my life. And I'm safe. And I can just take some deep breaths. And that's what I try to do when I get triggered by stuff, because it'll just randomly happen. You know, like I could listen to people talk about suicide and I don't have that reaction. It's when I see it.
I felt like that scene was very, I won't say triggering because I don't have like an incident that it could be triggered, but I can definitely see how if you did, it would be. It was jarring, that scene. It seemed very like authentic and very emotional. It really drew me in.
Yeah.
And it made me think, Mel Gibson's actually a good actor.
Well, he really was able, I mean, he really conveyed that expression of when you're battling your death instinct. And then also, he was in Vietnam. So it made me wonder how much of this is his wife dying and how much of this is just him. Because later, whenever he's talking to Roger, and Roger's like, dude, you're a lethal weapon. Like, you just kill everybody all the time. And he's like, well, that's the only thing I'm good at. Like, when I was in Vietnam, I was the best shot ever. And I'm good at killing people. So, since we're still talking about suicide, Riggs is showing that he's unhinged. Roger's like, hold the gun to his head.
Yeah.
Roger, okay, let me break this down just so you get the visual, because it like happens all of a sudden. So they're arguing about how reckless Roger is. And I'm sorry, how reckless Riggs is. And then Roger just pulls his gun out and puts it to his partner's head and is like, you should just go ahead and kill yourself. So Roger's really got two strikes against him in my book. And I'm like, he's supposed to be like the cool-headed good guy. But he's the one that's telling his new partner, who has like clear mental issues, that he should just go ahead and kill himself. So clearly Roger is also extremely scarred from being in Vietnam, the war. Because we didn't do it on purpose. But when we were watching American Gigolo, and I made the comment that I felt like all movies from the 80s were about the Vietnam War. And then we picked one that's like explicitly about the Vietnam War.
Yes.
I
did not realize that was a part of it. And then once I heard that, I was like, oh God, Holly's going to love this. Because I feel like you can tie so many movies to the Vietnam War somehow. And then this one is, it's served on a platter for you.
Well, there were 2,700,000 men and women who fought in the Vietnam War.
What?
From the United States.
Are you serious?
Yes, I looked it up today.
Okay. It lasted from November of 1955 till April 30th of 1975. So that was like, oh my gosh. So that was only 12 years before this movie.
Exactly.
Wow. And that's why they could have such large age differences and both have served. Because I was like, man, one of them must have been super young when they went in. But then it's like, no, wait, it lasted for 20 years.
Yeah. So,
exactly. Wow.
And 58,220 people died.
Awful.
In the war from the US.
And millions were scarred.
Yes. Not to mention when the soldiers came home and they were treated not great. And when you have PTSD, it changes your personality and it affects the people around you. So that just like spread, the effects of that just spread out when the soldiers came home. And the other thing I was thinking about with this movie in particular was that it's kind of like the greatest generation, as they like to be called. They, you know, they're World War II vets, and they just had this like culture of silence in raising their children. And so, but I also feel like the baby boomers in the 50s, you know, as they're growing up, they have like the cushiest lives of anybody in the United States, like before or after. The image that is given is that you guys don't understand what we went through. And I'm not saying any of this is conscious. I just feel like if I want to psychoanalyze a whole generation of people, which is super scientific, I would say that underneath it all, there's a very strong resentment of parents to their children of, you need to suffer in the same ways we did, and that will make you a real man. Because right now you're too soft. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because, you know, I heard older people who had served in World War II talking about like, why are you guys complaining? Like, this is what we do. We go to war. We had to do it. So you guys better suck it up and go do it too. I just feel like whenever you have a whole generation of people that were served up on a platter by their parents to be slaughtered, you're going to get a backlash. And the backlash is, don't trust authority. Breaking the rules is great because when you follow the rules, you end up dead in Vietnam, and our parents betrayed us. So the only people we have to rely on are ourselves. Does that set us up for the culture of narcissism that has occurred? You know, I don't know, but it seems like it. And one thing that I found very interesting with the Vietnam War, and there's a theme in Lethal Weapon of men crying, and that it's valid, manly behavior for a man to cry. And someone even comments that, like, it's the 80s now, men can cry. These guys are macho, but they're still expressing themselves emotionally. So I felt like in some ways that balanced out the very beginning of the movie for me.
Yeah, one of the police officers says, we aren't tough anymore. We're sensitive. We show our emotions around women and shit. That's the 80s, man. So the Vietnam connection is like what leads them to be really involved in this case. One of the people that, not Riggs, Roger served with was, it was his daughter who was murdered / committed suicide. And then he says, like, Roger, you owe me a favor. So something that happened back in Vietnam, I'm sure that he ended up saving Roger's life or something. So now he's like, you owe me a favor and you've got to find who killed my daughter and kill them all. And then later it turns out, like, wait, he knows that it's related to people that he knows and the organization that he's with.
Shadow Company.
The Shadow Company. Yeah, because he runs a bank, and so he's like the perfect thing for them to launder their money.
Yes. Yeah, it's money laundering.
His daughter is like the innocent victim of his crimes.
So here's another issue I have is I feel like daughters in this movie are up for grabs as a way to punish the men. And, you know, we see this in war time when soldiers strategically use raping women and children as a way to demoralize the men that they're fighting, aka destruction of property. And so it was interesting to me that that happened in Vietnam, as we all know, and that it's happening now, and that the guys that are the shadow company still use that tactic of punishing the men they're fighting through their women.
You're right.
So I was like, is that a statement about the horrors of war? Like, because they brought home the shadow company, they bring home the tactics of the Vietnam War. The shadow company, we find out, which, by the way, if you're called the shadow company, like, what are you doing? How did you name that? They ran the people that were bringing the heroin organization that was native to Laos. They ran them out under the guise of, we're protecting you guys. No, really. And then they killed everybody that was in that organization, which was sanctioned by the United States government. And then they took over the heroin trade. And then they're distributing the heroin to the United States. So this is interesting too, because we had a lot of Vietnam vets who came back to the United States with terrible heroin addictions. So they already have a built-in clientele. And the other thing I was thinking about, because we're watching Better Call Saul, and I was thinking about this within the context of that show, because basically you've got like these psychopathic, malignantly narcissistic people running these drug cartels, right? And then they are selling drugs to people who have been severely traumatized and wounded by psychopathic, malignantly narcissistic people that are in their lives. And the only way they know how to deal with it is to self-medicate with things like heroin or crystal meth. And I'm like, wow, this is interesting, because it's the same model for corporate America, which is, we're going to scare the shit out of you, and then we're going to sell you stuff and say that you'll feel safe, you'll feel loved, you'll feel wanted if you just buy this thing. Because you know what? You're ugly, you smell bad, and you just fucking suck, dude. Love corporate America.
You're on a tear, and I like it.
Thanks. So I was like, wow, that really connects back into this movie.
Yeah. As I snort my Coke. I'm just kidding. I don't do drugs. It's just because we're talking about 80s movies. You have to talk about Coke. So I wonder also if that's why the helicopter played so prominently in this movie, because you always associate that footage of the helicopters with Vietnam. And it's like they use it all the time for things that seem like, do you really need a helicopter for this? You know?
Yeah. It was like it was recreating the sounds and the associations of the war. The Vietnam War, it like brought back the veterans, and I'm not blaming Vietnam vets at all for this. I'm just observing it as a trend that, you know, there's a distinct shift in our media during and after the war. And that distinct shift is a shift towards death, destruction, and violence in the media. And it's almost like, the men and women who were in Vietnam, it's like they brought back a desensitized palate where death was no longer as horrific. Or maybe it was still horrific, but they were just numb to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it kind of like came back with everyone, and it started to be expressed more through movies and television. And a lot of times explicitly with the backdrop of being a Vietnam vet, like Magnum PI, in particular, the A-Team.
That's right.
It's not surprising the cultural landscape of media became more violent.
Let's see.
And also with the Shadow Company. Okay, so they come into an area, they kill all of the native people there, and then they plunder the environment for whatever natural resource they can find to send back to another people and make a bunch of money off of it. Is Dick Donner an anarchist?
I don't know, but I'm going to look into him.
It's like thus far, he totally dissed the Catholic Church with The Omen. And now he's dissing the United States with Lethal Weapon. But he's doing it in such a way that he's selling it to the American public because they are thirsty for anarchy.
There are a couple times when maybe future glimpses of Mel Gibson come through in this movie. And whenever they're talking, he uses, the word hooker a lot, which, in the 80s people did. But they're in an explosion. He's on fire. Roger, Danny Glover, is getting over him to get on top of him and beat the flames out. And then he's like, "What are you, an F word or something?" The FAG blank blank OT word. And he's like, "No, I'm trying to put out the fire that's on your back. Calm down." And it's like, okay, take it easy. Sometimes we get through an 80s movie without that word being in it, but not this time. Yeah. And then another point, when they were trying to figure out what happened to the girl at the beginning, who was a sex worker, and the other sex worker had witnessed her fall, they were trying to figure out how were they together. And then they determined someone else had been in the bed with her before she jumped or fell. And then Roger's like, "It could have been Dixie, the other girl." And then Riggs is like, "That's disgusting, but it is possible." And I was like, okay, calm down.
Yeah, really.
Plus, I would think in any 80s movie, a guy would be like, "Oh, yeah." Right. They'd high five over it.
But see, I guess they were also with that kind of showing his character as being a dedicated husband. That he wouldn't think that was hot because he's a committed heterosexual.
Okay. So other issues that this movie touches on. It touches on a lot. Suicide, mental health, drug abuse, sex work, Vietnam War, colonization.
Bad
so
cooking.
Many things. Bad cooking, because it's the 80s and the woman's cooking is always a topic. It has to be a topic of conversation. And it's usually about it being bad. That's just a running, I don't know, every director's mom was maybe a bad cook and it was a running joke in their family. So they put it in. I don't know, but it's all right, wah, wah, we get it.
Mm-hmm.
She sucks at cooking, which you know what? If they didn't make it he didn't cheat on her because of it. So that's good.
That's true.
So he's a great guy.
Yeah, sure.
He deserves 5 stars.
Yeah.
For putting up with bad food and not having sex with someone else. Man of the year. That's pretty much the message that we've gotten over the course of the movies we've watched so far.
Absolutely.
So also in this movie, they touch on the issue of legalizing marijuana. His daughter brings it up, and they bring up the point of like, she got in trouble because she smoked weed in the house, which is like ballsy for a 15 or 16-year-old or whatever. And then so she got grounded, but they didn't make a huge deal of it, which seemed kind of progressive for a cop dad in the 80s. And then she's like, okay, so you guys are out here drinking a 6-pack, but you can't smoke weed. And then Riggs is like, she's right. And it's like people get super altered on alcohol on a daily basis and become violent. And we all already know this, but it's like, yeah, why is that fine?
Because it is a way to, you'll notice that the things that became illegal were all drugs that could potentially get you into connection with your spirit and your own sovereignty as a human being with a soul.
Like
and
PCP?
Connecting you. Yeah, like PCP, cocaine. No, but like, you know, like weed, like marijuana and hallucinogens, they have very significant mental and spiritual values when used responsibly. And people started saying things like make love, not war. But the problem with that is when you make love and not war, you don't spend any fucking money.
And we're back to corporate America. This goes all the way to the top floor.
It does go all the way to the top fucking floor. Also, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so I'm not saying anything like that. I thought the soundtrack to this was absolute trash.
I don't even
highly
notice it.
Offensive to my ears.
Okay. I noticed in the beginning that Eric Clapton was listed on the soundtrack, and I was like, oh man, that should be something. That's like a huge deal in 87 especially. But then I didn't pay any attention to the songs. It's definitely not a Top Gun. You don't have Kenny Loggins in the 80s, forget your soundtrack. Just throw it in the garbage. Don't waste your money.
Also, Eric Clapton was in the throes of severe alcohol addiction in the 80s, which is another reason I brought up this point. And
he was also addicted to cocaine, I'm sure, because he did that cocaine song. Which I sang in fourth grade while we were in line by the chalkboard and swipe my fingers through the chalk dust and sing cocaine. And then our teacher heard me. And then it's like, my parents are so straight-laced. They're what does the teacher think when something like that happens? Just because my dad isn't a Eric Clapton fan. I'm just trying to put myself in that spot and be like, if I saw a fourth grader do that, would I call like DCFS right now? Probably. Whenever they were at the scene of the explosion where Dixie was killed because she knew too much as well, after Mel Gibson accused Danny Glover of being homosexual just for trying to put the fire out on his back. Then they go to talk to this little group of kids who witnessed it, and they had some information. So Danny Glover and Riggs go to talk to him, and they're like, hey guys, can you answer some questions for us? And the little kids are like, Mama says that cops shoot black people. Mom says that cops shoot black people. And they like won't talk to him. And I was like, ooh.
White America was not talking about this issue in 1988. For it to be in this movie, like it's a bold statement in 1988.
Ahead of its time, even though it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's just like we're still talking about it as if it's like new.
Right when Roger and Riggs are together and they catch Dixie's pimp. And Roger's like, you can't fucking kill this guy. Like, we need him to talk. And he's like, no killing. Roger specifically says this to Riggs, no killing. And I was like, okay, so the black cop is telling the white cop not to kill the suspects. So I just, that like reinforced what the little boys were saying later of like, well, our mom told us that cops kill Black people. So it's definitely in the air of this movie.
Yeah, which really is a lot of like social commentary buried within this action film. And mental health. So the other thing we were talking about, Mel Gibson's struggles with suicidal thoughts. And then he says like, they basically all think he's faking. So he was telling Danny Glover or Roger, like, I'm either suicidal or I'm faking it to get a psycho pension. Either way, I'm fucked. And so it's like, yeah, neither of those are good options, you know, and no one's being sensitive to him in any way, except the psychologist who's trying to like vouch for him and be like, this guy's on the edge. And then the captain was just like, well, I guess if he kills himself, then we'll know you were right. And then just like slams the door. It's well, like, that's nice.
Well, you know, that parallels how the Greatest Generation World War II vets told their sons that you just have to suck it up. We went through this. You can go through it. And when the men came back from the Vietnam War, when the boys came back from the Vietnam War, it was like, you don't have PTSD. That's not a thing. Look, we all went through World War II, the worst war in the world, and we're just fine. Be a real man. The captain's kind of like the stand-in for the baby boomers' fathers.
Yeah. So this is in our Hollywood Hunks series. And then so some people might find it controversial to consider Mel Gibson a hunk still. Because of his thing. So I just wanted to say that for me, the real hunk is Gary Busey.
You know, he played Buddy Holly.
Oh my God, that's right. I always forget. And then you tell me. I was thinking, like, he doesn't look that bad in this movie. Like, he's before the whole wild-eyed
Well, he had a traumatic brain injury.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
okay, I feel bad.
Yeah, he was in a motorcycle accident.
Have you told me this?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay, I feel bad.
Well, I mean, I think that in combination with probably trying to self-soothe with drugs and alcohol, you know, and you get the Gary Busey of the last whatever, how many years, you know?
Wow. Okay, that explains some things.
But I remember people thinking Gary Busey was really handsome back in the 80s.
Are you thinking of Nick Nolte, though?
Oh my God.
I get them mixed up.
Shit, I'm totally thinking of Nick Nolte because I get them mixed up too. That's exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happened. Never mind.
Oh.
Well, I didn't find any hunks in this movie. Like at all. There were no hunks to be found.
I mean, Mel Gibson was cute, obviously, like at the time. I was never like super into him, but I remember being like, he's cute. And obviously he was like physically fit.
Whenever we're like introduced to Mel Gibson and to Riggs and he's drinking and smoking in the morning and he's shirtless, or I guess he's like completely nude or whatever.
Yeah. He's wearing a shirt with no bottoms, like Donald Duck.
And that is so not sexy.
That's from a movie, but I can't remember what.
I can see how women were gaga for him in this particular scene, even though I wasn't like attracted to him. I was like, oh, okay, I kind of get this. I understand finding Danny Glover attractive
Uh-huh.
more than I do Mel Gibson. And not in this movie, because I actually don't like Roger's character very much at all.
Right.
I just, you know what? I feel like my mom was onto something.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'd have to go with Danny Glover as the Hollywood hunk in this one.
Sorry, Gary. Beard. I prefer him with the beard as well. So he shaved it because he thought it made him look older. And then when he got to work, they're like, you look older now that you shaved. And he was like, man, this movie had some like ageism towards men in it, which is like rare.
Oh my God. You know what? I take that back completely. Okay.
What?
I did have a Hollywood hunk in this movie, but you really didn't see him, but you heard him. And that is Alex Trebek, the host of Jeopardy.
Oh.
Who you hear in the background.
That's awesome. He was cute and he looked the same for like ever.
When I was in like junior high and high school, I would watch that show because I thought he was cute.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That's funny. He was cute. He looked very just like well-groomed and curls in all the right places. He was smart, which you like the brains.
I like my man to be smarter than me.
That's easy.
Nice.
And you like your friends to be meaner than you.
That's easy.
Whew, I just went back to my high school.
Woo.
Okay. So, the other thing I was going to say is Darlene Love plays the wife and she sings. So Riggs comes to their house for dinner and then the daughter, who's probably like 15 or 16 or something,
mm-hmm.
is just like staring at him the whole time. And the whole family can tell that she's got a crush on him. And he doesn't say anything or like really acknowledge it. And then the other little kids at the table and teasing her about it. And her dad looks at her and sees what's going on. And he's like, go get something out of the other room. Like, get away from this table. And then she calls Riggs by his first name. And then her dad's like, call him Mr. Riggs. It's like everyone can see. But I feel like he handled it well. It wasn't really ever an issue. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if my dad brought someone that looked like that home to the table, I would have been also wanting to be flirting with him.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager. Not like openly flirting with him, but I would just like think he was cute. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I would be like trying to hide it, but it would probably be obvious to other people. Mm-hmm. So I'd be like, this person's so cute and they're sitting so close to me and they're in my house. And then while they're at the table, the other little kids start like rapping and teasing the sister in a rap. And then they make the dad rap. I feel like the movie could have done without it. Like it wasn't necessary, but I do feel like at least they didn't make it where Riggs was like toying with her emotions or flirting back. Like he basically just didn't even acknowledge it. And the family acknowledged it and was like embarrassed and like, come on, stop doing this. And I didn't think it was that bad.
I feel like Riggs is just being polite and sort of like holding space for her crush without engaging. It's like with this fine line of being, because you don't want to shame a kid.
Yeah.
And kids are easily shamed, especially around when they think somebody's cute or they have a crush. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to shame them, but you don't want to encourage it. You can't get more explicit than somebody making the statement like, if you're an adult, you can't fuck teenagers.
Mm-hmm. That was good. Yay, Richard Donner. Yeah, so I feel like they really lured me in. This is about Mel Gibson's mental health emotion journey. And then I was like, oh, so it made me just like see the whole movie in a different light that I never really realized before. And I kind of thought of it all that way. So it made me more like open and receptive to it. And then the action stuff, yeah, it's like, whatever. I'm not super into it. And kind of at the end, you just kind of fade out when it gets all actiony. I'm just like, all right, are we done yet?
Right.
But then the very last scene, so they're finally like bringing Gary Busey, Mr. Joshua, to justice after they've gotten pretty much every one of the other bad guys. And he had killed like multiple police officers and threatened Danny Glover's daughter. And so it comes down to just like mano y mano, Riggs versus Joshua, Mel Gibson versus Gary Busey. And it turns into mud wrestling because they'd run into a fire hydrant and they're mud wrestling in the front yard. And I was like, this again is for the women. So
also, mud
that
wrestling.
was interesting. Yeah.
Call back to Stripes.
Yes. So I was like, that's cool. He's totally just using Mel Gibson for eye candy because the women are like ready to go. This movie's been too long. And then they like bring you back in with shirtless, muddy Mel Gibson. Yeah. And then they're doing like a death match. And he's using all of his like lethal weapon skills, like his Tai Chi and those things that he's learned. And then he's got Gary Busey in like a headlock with his thighs. And then I was thinking like, I'd be really scared to have Gary Busey's teeth that close to my genitals. Like he was really taking a risk. But it paid off because he won. And then they're going to let him go alive. And then Gary Busey's getting handcuffed. And then he finds a way to get a gun from the cop that's handcuffing him. And then both Riggs and Rogers shoot at him at the same time. They kill him together. So then it's like, they're definitely partners for life now.
It's like they killed their Vietnam War ghosts through this whole case.
Yeah.
Of dealing with this shadow company.
Yes.
If we played a drinking game where we took a shot of booze every time someone died in this movie, we would be in the hospital.
Yeah. There's
Who's up for a drinking game?
Don't do it.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. This is like a throwback to an Uncover that you did. So in the very beginning of the movie, when we see the girl who's about to die and she's like naked, wearing white lace and like writhing around, sucking on her giant long red fingernails. And it's like she's looking at something that's not there, like interacting with something that's not there in a very sexual way. And then I was like, is this ghost sex?
Oh my God, what if she had ghost sex?
Maybe she had ghost sex. And then the ghost got inside of her and told her to kill herself. I feel like that's an unexplored angle.
Yeah. Wow.
Rewatch that and have ghost sex in your mind and you'll be like, oh my God.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that was our Spectrophilia special.
Yeah, that's the technical name.
Yeah.
Spectrophilia special. There was an amazing banana clip in there. I've been really thinking about bringing banana clips back. And then I saw some at the store the other day.
Nice.
So I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it. It's just so easy. You get a formal do instantly. And they're going to come back. It's the ease. I did have some tiny bits of Lethal Weapon trivia.
Nice.
Let me pull it back up. The first one was, did you know that they originally wanted Bill Murray to play Riggs?
I just took a drink of coffee and almost spit it out. That was great. Thank you so much for that. You're welcome. Somehow I wasn't expecting it.
You weren't? Oh, good.
No, I wasn't. It was great.
Okay, but I do have this little bit, which is like, I thought of this in the beginning. So it starts out as a Christmas movie, but it's action. And I didn't remember this being Christmassy. So then I was like, ooh, like Die Hard. Like everyone says Die Hard is a Christmas movie. And I'm like, I finally just watched it like a year or two ago. Dan got me to watch it to be like, look, it is. I still say it's not.
Well, okay, that's another movie. Yeah, totally. Lethal Weapon's a Christmas movie too. Nobody says that.
How come it doesn't get that billing?
I don't know. You know why? Because of Riggs' butt. Nobody cares about Christmas.
Okay.
It's all about the money shots.
Mm-hmm. I think we should start the campaign to make this the new Christmas movie.
I'm just going to start rudely correcting people when they bring up Lethal Weapon.
You mean a Christmas movie?
You mean that Christmas movie, Lethal Weapon?
Yes. I think it's only fair.
It's a Christmas movie, okay?
Exactly.
Like that?
Yeah, that's how people are about Die Hard.
I know.
Exactly. We're doing it. But seriously, they did consider Bruce Willis for this role and then also him for the other role. And they're 1 year apart.
Did they consider Mel Gibson for Die Hard?
Yeah.
They did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was considered to play McClane along with his co-stars from The Expendables.
Bill Murray was first offered the role of Die Hard in 1985.
But he turned it down.
At which point production stalled.
What was it? There was one thing. Oh, Mel Gibson turned down roles in The Fly and The Untouchables to make this movie.
Was he gonna be Kevin Costner's character in The Untouchables?
I don't know. I don't have those details. I was thinking of asking if this should be considered a Christmas movie like Die Hard is. Mm-hmm. Or I was going to ask, have you ever brought your dad a cake while he was in the bathtub?
That's what I really want to know.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever brought your dad anything while he was in the bathtub or even been outside the door while he was in the bathtub? Because none of that.
Also, I would like to know if you've ever had a crush on one of your parents' friends.
Oh.
Like stories about crushes on parents' friends. Yeah,
I remember. I might have told the story. I might have told every story by now. I don't even remember. So bear with me. So. But when I was little, like probably 7 or 8, maybe a little older, my dad's friend had a friend and they would always like work on cars together and stuff. And one of them was like younger than my dad and his friend. And I thought he was so cute. He had like blonde hair, which was like, and like a tiny mustache, total 80s looking, like what you would expect. His name was like Scotty. And I thought he was so cute. He was like probably in his 20s or 30s. And I was just like, Scotty. And I remember like having a crush on him, but he was always like really sweet, but nothing weird. And I think I even like sat on his lap before, like I was working it. Like that's messed up. Like they would all be outside together. So I was never like alone with them or anything, but I would just be like, and it's like, obviously I'm sure they all knew and they just thought it was cute and funny and let me do my thing.
Yeah. As disgusting as this is, I have heard people be like, well, she was flirting with me, like about a child or a teenager. And it's like, yes. And you're the fucking adult. So that means you hold the space of no, because it's a child. It's a problem when adults interpret the child's natural exploration of sexual boundaries as an invitation to exploit those boundaries. And that's 100% on the adult.
So if you've ever had a crush on your parents' friend, tell us about it. Hopefully it didn't get weird. Tell us about it at coverarspodcast@gmail.com. Oh, I never looked up that song Darlene Love sang. Were you going to look that
what? She does it. Actually, you know what? Just to add further,
a Christmas song?
She does a lot of Christmas songs.
I thought so.
Yeah, which is just... is that why she's in this movie? Because it's a Christmas movie. One of her most popular songs is our favorite Christmas song, A Marshmallow World.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's number 4 on Spotify of her most popular.
Oh, neat.
Her most popular is Today I Met the Boy I'm Gonna Marry.
Oh my God, I love that song.
And then the next one is Christmas, Baby, Please Come Home.
Yes, I knew it was a good one.
Winter Wonderland, A Marshmallow World.
Man, she's
All
good.
Alone on Christmas. Those are her top 5 songs on.
Yeah, those top 2 are so good. Everyone should listen to them. Aw.
Over on Patreon, we are talking about the classic Christopher Pike novel, Spellbound.
I can't wait. That was the Lethal Weapon episode. It really went all over the place. I don't even know where we are anymore. So I hope you enjoyed it. We enjoyed making it. Thank you for listening. If you like it, you can rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank
what
you.
else?
We love to hear from you, regardless of whether or not you want to support us on Patreon.
We love you. Bye. We love you. Thank you.
Yes.
See you next Tuesday.
All right. See ya next Tuesday. Thank you for listening to Cover Your Eyes podcast.
That's Australian.